Hi everybody, glad you could make it tonight. Sure is dark out here. Makes me wish I brought something along besides this flashlight so I could see where I was going. Maybe a big lantern. That reminds me of a story I heard when I was about your age. Would you like to hear it? It's a ghost story, and it's a true story. Well, at least I think it might be true because I know the person that it happened to. In fact, that person told me the story. And another reason why I think it might be true is that person was one of my teachers. Like I said, I was in the 3rd grade at Garfield Elementary School, and our art teacher was a man named Mr. Dixon. Mr. Dixon and his wife lived one town over in Old Washington. That's on the National Road there. And they lived in this great big 3-story brick Victorian mansion. Been built about 1850, around about there. Had lots and lots of rooms, and it had 7 or 8 doors to take you outside. Big house. And they've been restoring it for several years by the time I met them. And they were always working on something. So he told us this story one day when we were in class. We were being wiggly and weren't listening very well because it was almost Halloween. So we were kind of, all excited about trick or treat and what we were going to dress like for Halloween and getting all that candy. And so we tried to get our attention and we just weren't listening. We and we were probably drawing rabbits because Mr. Dixon liked to draw rabbits. He was very good at it. That was the thing I remember the most. And he was standing up in front of the room with this big drawing tablet, and he told us in his big booming voice, he was a pretty big guy, he said, "Did I ever tell you kids about the time my wife saw a ghost?" Well, that got our attention. And this is the story he told us. So it was a Saturday morning, I think he said, and he and his wife were still working on the house. They were painting in the kitchen this time. She was up on a ladder painting something above the door that goes into the kitchen. And he'd gone down to the basement. She didn't like to go down to the basement, but he liked to go down there and putter around. And the basement floor was all dirt, so they were always digging something up down there, like little pieces of broken dishes, marbles, small little things like that that had been left behind by people who lived there before. The house had been a school, it had been an old folks home, and now they're trying to turn it back into a home that you could live in. It needed a lot of work though, because it was at that time 120, 30 years old, so it needed a lot of work. And well, he was always finding something in the basement, so he found something else that he was trying to dig out. This thing was a little bit bigger than a marble. And his wife was upstairs painting, and he heard her talking to somebody. Well, they were home by themselves, but he didn't think much about it. He thought maybe a friend had stopped by, and it wasn't anything unusual on a Saturday. So he went back to what he was doing, and pretty soon, just a couple minutes later, he heard her calling his name. So he was thinking probably, how husbands and wives are. What does she want now? I'm busy doing something. But he goes up the stairs, and he saw her face, and it was pale as a ghost. And this is the story she told him. She told him she'd seen a little boy in the kitchen. And he thought, well, we're home by ourselves. At that time, all the grandkids were living other places, so he thought, well, maybe it was a neighbor, another little boy from the neighborhood came in, and he thought surely that's all it was. And then she told him, well, he was barefoot. Well, the way I've heard this story, the way they told it, that it was kind of cold outside, so it was a little bit strange. They thought that the kid might be running around with no shoes on. And then she told him this. She said, he was standing right there where you are, Bill, she said. And I asked him what he wanted. I'm up here on the ladder, and I asked him how he got in. And instead of saying anything to me, he looked right at me. And instead of running away, he faded. He faded away. Well, I don't know any people that can do that, do you? Mr. Dixon thought, well, okay, maybe you just didn't see him leave, Maybe you turned your head and he just ran out one of the doors because we've got so many of them. And he told her, go ahead and lock up all those doors, make sure they're all locked. And she went back to what she was doing with her painting, and he went back down to the basement. And he kept working and working on that thing that he was digging up. And he finally got it free. And he carried it up the stairs to show her. Well, when he got up there, he thought she'd gone pale before when she told him about seeing somebody in the house. But she went really pale this time because he held up what he'd been digging out of the basement floor, and it was this big old lantern. Really tall, probably about like 16, 17 inches high, really big. I guess it was the kind like they would take to churches or to meeting halls. Not really the kind you probably have in a house, and you put a candle in it, or maybe it used oil and you lit a wick inside and burned the oil off. Not something that people really used when this was the late 1970s or early 1980s when this happened. People really weren't using those too much then, except for camping, and the camping lanterns were pretty small. So her face really went white. She said, "Bill, that little boy was holding a lantern just like that." Huh. Well, that really changed things, didn't it? I don't think it was a little boy, do you? I think it was a ghost. There's something you need to know about where this house is. So Old Washington is a pretty old town. It's in eastern Guernsey County, and the main drag of it actually lies along the National Road, or US Route 40 as we all know it. And this house was built for a senator, so it's a big mansion. He had a big family, lots of daughters who liked to have parties. And he may or may not have been involved with the Underground Railroad. So maybe the little boy was part of that. Maybe it was a little boy who'd been killed on the road outside. There were a lot of accidents back then where kids would get trampled by wagons, run over by the wagons, or trampled by a horse. Maybe he got lost somewhere in the woods. This area had been really wooded at the time. It would have been mostly forest in the late 1800s, and I know that's true. They really know. All they know is that day, Mrs. Dixon was pretty sure she didn't see a regular little boy. We'd be pretty tired. I think I'm gonna have to put out the fire and head home here soon. Just wish it wasn't so dark out here. Just wish I brought something else along. Did you hear that noise? What's that? Oh my gosh, you guys, what is that? What's that light? Is that a lantern? I didn't bring any lantern. Oh my gosh, I'm gonna put out this fire and I'm getting out of here. I'll see you all later. Have a good night.